the opportunity now to have some OTA similar things like they do in the NFL. So we have a little bit of time allotted with the players, so you can go back and re-hit the things you did in the spring, and then there's still parts of the system which weren't hit in the spring that you want to be able to introduce.
James mentioned that Max Granville has long-term injuries out now. How does that kind of change things for you? And obviously he was a very versatile player last year. How do you kind of replace someone like that? Obviously, it being earlier helps.
Yeah, we feel bad for Max, and I thought he had a great spring. So I don't think it changes things because we have a lot of depth at end. But certainly miss him. When you go back and watch spring film, you see he did a lot of really good things. He still has a bright future, but really just feel bad for him.
What position groups have surprised you maybe since you got here?
Definitely our corners. I mean, I feel like our corners are a real strength in this defense, and I've been impressed by not only the way they cover, they do a great job, but just the culture in that room with Coach Smith, and the accountability and the way they practice and meet. I've really been impressed.
Did you know much about Terry before you got here? And,
I remember Terry when he was a high school coach. Yeah, so no, I didn't know him personally. Yeah, I didn't know him personally, but always a lot of respect. I mean, in the profession, he's a really well-respected guy.
You mentioned the corner room. A.J. Harris made more of a name for himself last year in his first year at Penn State. What does the next step look like for someone like that? He mentioned in the spring kind of the mental side that you're helping him with. Is that what that is?
Yeah, I think just giving him more tools, within the defense. He can play man, but we want to give him more an opportunity to, define the leverage on the receiver and know where your help is, and play some different coverages that they haven't played in the past to give him a chance to make more plays and really to understand football better. That's it. As he goes to the next level, giving him a wider array, in his toolbox of techniques that he understands.
Is he someone that could move around the defense more this year?
I think he could. He's that talented, but you kind of don't want to give him up as being, a guy who can go against the team's top receiver in that matchup.
How much of that is physical talent, and how much of it is being able to handle all of those different?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're going to see. We're starting to see that he can pick it up. Right? It's just a matter of challenging him with all those different things and techniques that he needs to know, and he needs to know for us, but he needs to know for him. And so far, so good. I mean, he's picking up on it.
We haven't seen Zuriah Fisher in a while. James was saying he's a guy in the program that everybody has a pretty high level of respect for. What could you tell us what people should expect to see from him this season?
Yeah, I mean, I expect him to be one of those breakout guys. A guy who's been limited in the past, but has been around the program, has an incredible sense of maturity and what Penn State stands for and the culture. And he's a real leader. I mean, like you said, he has a lot of respect of the players. And now we want him to experience that success on the field. So I think he's going to have a breakout year.
You mentioned in the spring the mental aspect of playing that fifth defensive back spot that you use. Has anyone stood out from a completely ignoring the on-field part of it? Has anyone stood out from a meeting perspective that you think would adapt well to that spot?
We didn't get a chance to really see Zion because he was out all spring. So I'm looking forward to what he can do there. Haven't seen much of him yet in the system, but yeah, we did it with Dinkins and Wolseley, and I was impressed with both those guys. I mean, I was impressed with Kenny Wolseley, even like the second half of spring. I thought really had kind of a real surge, and was really picking up on things well. and that's what you want. You want a guy there with corner skills. I think Dink has more safety skills, so I think they both kind of complement each other. But I was impressed with the way they picked it up.
I was going to ask, is there different situations where somebody was more safety-oriented and versus corner-oriented?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that position is kind of interchangeable. And, you know, you can put a linebacker there, and that's really limited, and you put a safety there, and that gives you more options. And then you put a corner there, and it gives you different options. So a lot of it does have to be game planned and with the opponent.
Where do you think your biggest impact has been made so far?
You know, I feel like it's just the introduction of some change-ups maybe to what they were doing in the past, and emphasis on communication. You know, I think there's been a lot more talking, you know, a lot more identifying the offensive set, and, you know, it all goes into having, eventually wanting those guys to think like I think and see the same things that I see. So I think that communication, that formation recognition, and just having a bigger toolbox, you know, I mean, that's to give them a variety of techniques to play.
Jim, have you spent enough time around Dan Connor yet to get a sense of how he's able to connect with players so well?
Yeah, I mean, Dan has I've spent a lot of time with Dan. He has that, number one, he has that immediate respect. You know, I don't think you can undersell that because, you know, a guy who was a real high performer at Penn State and then in the NFL, I mean, those guys are going to look at him differently than they look at me, you know, or anybody else from the start, just walking in the room. And then, I've seen that he's a very detailed guy, you know, so he's training them like he was trained in the NFL, you know, and he gives them a lot of information, and detailed information that I think is a real plus.
Rojas was limited in the spring. What was he able to get done, though? I mean, like, I assume film and that sort of thing?
Yeah, the film in the meeting room. I just met with Tony yesterday, actually, and he's able. You can see when we're going through some things now, and even like a jog through kind of pace, that he's picked a lot of it up. You know, he's smart. So, and he wants it. You know, he wants it. He wants to be able to learn and grow his game, you know, into a more of an NFL style game. So I feel like he picked up a lot, you know, by just learning in the spring. Now he's got to put it on the field.
How big is camp for him then?
Huge. Yeah, I mean, it's huge. His development in this system has got to be a lot faster because he didn't have the spring. So, you know, and I told him expectations are high, and we expect a lot out of him. So he, of course, he'll be able to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but he's going to have to pick up the corrections at a faster pace.
Well, he's got to be a leader too, right?
All of it. You know, he's in that role now, and he knows that. We talked about that.
Amare, I'm sorry.
Coach, so obviously your first year here, so how has being here in the first couple months kind of lived up to the expectations kind of nationwide about the Penn State program?
Yeah, I think you feel the culture immediately when you walk in. I mean, when you see it from afar as an opponent, you know, you can tell how the guys play, how they carry themselves, you know, the way they execute. You can tell that's part of Coach Franco's culture. But when you're actually in it and you're seeing that the standards are kept every day, you know, it's even better than I thought.
Coach Kotelnicki mentioned a second ago just about how having a staff and how everybody collaborates helps everybody in the organization. So how have you kind of grown to learn that throughout your career, and how much has this staff already helped you and continue to help you improve and help everybody improve in the organization?
Yeah, I think it's a real family here. It's kind of an overused word, but it's a real family. Everybody's pulling in the same direction. Information is freely shared. You know, no one is trying to, do things from an ego standpoint or just concerned about their side of the ball. I think that's a tribute to the culture Coach Franco has built, and I've seen it here just in my short time. really operate at the highest level with all the staff members, helping each other and pulling in the same direction.
Thank you so much.
What did you see from Amare from North Carolina? Like, I assume you watched film, and that's a stupid question because I know you watch film of everybody, but
No, Amare, what I saw from Amare was the ability to play in space and then also, inside the box. So I thought he had a really nice combination of the athletic skills necessary to operate in the open field. But when it came to being tough inside, those are the linebackers that are hard to find. Can they be in space, and then can they defend the straight ahead run? And I saw that on film.
everybody knows about Zane. Who are some of the guys who are also kind of stepping up there? We haven't seen a lot of some of those kids.
No, I think I was impressed with the other tackles. Xavier, Gilliam, Ty, Blaney, I thought, and even Owen Wafer, who just came in here, right? I was really impressed by those guys with the way they played. Randy, for a young freshman coming in, I thought, so that tackle group, everybody knows about Zane, but I was impressed. Now I haven't seen Ford yet, and he's a guy that Dion thinks really highly of. So I'm real happy with the depth there.
Darius Dixon's a guy that impressed a lot of people, seeing him for the first time in the blue-white game. What impresses you about him, and is he a guy that could see some significant play time even as a freshman in the secondary?
Definitely, he is. I was as impressed with Darius as I've been with any freshman in my career who's still supposed to be in high school. For guys to come in at that mid-year, he has incredible maturity, and consistency. He doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low. That maturity that you see, you don't expect from a high school senior. So, yes, the talent, they're all talented, or they wouldn't be at Penn State. But he has the maturity to play right away.
Jim, you guys, Andy said, went back, looked at Penn State, Ohio State last year and had a pretty honest, critical review. I guess kind of how can you set the scene for me of like how that unfolds, and what are maybe some of the things that you think you maybe pointed out or helped them with?
Well, I'm not going to give away the secrets.
Right.
I can't give away the secrets.
What you can tell us,
Right. It unfolds because Coach Franklin's really detailed, and Andy wants it. Andy wants to learn. I want to learn. It unfolds because it's a very collaborative staff, and no one is trying to defend their turf. So there's a lot of free flowing of information, and you just literally sit down, nuts and bolts, and kind of go through the game. And Andy says, "Here's what I was thinking," and here's what, and I say, "Here, I was thinking this," and really just a lot of back and forth and a lot of talking as you go through it.
He said one of the things that you brought up obviously was like at that point of the year, Drew's health was in question, coming off the injury, and the two quarterback system. How difficult was it to try and prepare for that?
Yeah, that was tough because we, particularly with Drew being where he was at the time, didn't know what to expect. How much of it were you going to get, and then if you did get it, how much was Drew going to run coming off an injury? So there were a lot of things up in the air. Yeah.
How long does a process like that take to review a game? Are we talking 3 hours, 2 hours, longer?
Yeah, more. Yeah, between 2 to 3 hours. Yeah, absolutely. And that was probably just the first time we do it. I'm sure we'll do it again.
How common or rare is that to do that?
It's rare.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it happens a whole lot. Like I said, this is a very collaborative staff, and everybody wants to win at the highest level. So we're all looking for that edge and that information, and we're not afraid of offending our ego. Guys are really upfront and honest, and I think that's where growth comes from.
Where are you at this point in the offseason in terms of, I know James would tell us before of like, okay, we want guys to start looking ahead to week 1, week 2 opponents, week 3 start looking at stuff. How do you kind of structure that, and where are maybe you at in your prep for next year?
because it's my first year, my focus is really right now all on our team. You know, we got to go back this summer and re-hit everything we did in the spring, and then there's plenty that we didn't even get to in the spring that I have to start to introduce. You know, so it's really just on our team.
I know I've probably asked you about this 3 different ways, but I'm just curious of your nickel position. In your mind, I know anyone can play either corner or safety. Do you think of that as a safety, or do you think of that as a corner when you're designing what you want that player to do?
It really depends on the opponent. You know, I mean, I think you want to have versatility there. I mean, if you can find one guy who can do it all, great. But if you can find, you know, a safety type to be in certain situations based on what you're getting, and a corner type to be in other situations, you know, you can make a lot out of that too. So that's kind of where it goes for me is, you know, what are we trying to defend?
Jordan Hancock played a lot at that position for you last year. Is that and I apologize if this is about last year a lot, but is that an institutional thing, or he was able to do everything? And I guess what's the situation that you perceive for here as far as reps for guys at that position? Do you need
I think it's really difficult to know until they get into the fire, you know? It's like Jordan the year before, you know, got kind of thrown into the fire, and you know, he picked up on it. So now, then you want to play to your player's strengths. So, you know, Jordan was a guy who really learned how to do it all. So you felt comfortable with him in there in any situation. You know, even if he had to get in there and defend the run. You know, being a former corner, he just showed a knack for it. You know what I mean? So I think you have to really go off of what the players show you on the field.
Have you seen guys that you think have similar skill sets that might be able to achieve that? And I guess the thing I'm wondering is, Penn State's always played a lot of guys at any position, you know, bringing depth up. So have you seen anybody that you think could take that position kind of in a commanding way?
One of the issues for me is I haven't seen Zion because he was out all spring, right? So I'm really looking forward to him, you know, being the guy who can do it. You know, like you mentioned, we got to see, you know, what are his best situations and can he do well in any situation. But the 2 guys we had in the spring, you know, with Dinkins and Kenny Wolseley, you know, I thought they were a little different, you know, and you had that balance between, okay, Dinkins is more of a safety doing it, Kenny's more of a corner doing it, you know. So they both showed their different areas that they're strong at. You know, just with those 2 alone, you could balance it in different situations. Now Zion comes in, and we're expecting a lot out of him. So I'm really hopeful that he'll be a guy who can do it all.
What do you want from your linebackers in your system?
Wow, I want them to make every tackle. That's not asking too much, is it? Right.
I guess you've watched Penn State's defense and you understand kind of like what they were doing previously, I assume. So is it radically different? Is it subtly different? Like, are there?
Yeah, there'll be some that's the same, and some that'll be different. You know what I mean? It's I think with an expansion of the system, right? If those linebackers can learn where the ball's going to end up, like I call it Gretzky. You know, Gretzky said, "How did you score so many goals?" And he said, "It's because I went to where the puck was going to be, not where it is." You know, so in this system, when linebackers can learn, I make a call, the offense runs this play, the ball's going to end up over here. You know what I mean? That's it, they start to learn that, and then they play faster and they get to that spot. You know, so there are some real directed approaches where once they learn it, they know where the ball is going to end up, and they can be really effective.
Was it difficult, you know, trying to install these things and you get a sense of what you're going to have when you mentioned Zion's not out there, Tony's not out there, and I imagine he's a big part of what you want to do.
Yes.
Do you feel like you have a sense of the kind of an understanding of the pieces yet, or do you need to see more?
I need to see more. Yeah, I mean, high expectations. There's 2 guys you mentioned. You know, Deny wasn't out there. You know, Zane was limited. Alonzo Ford wasn't there. You know, so we had some different guys who weren't fully available. So you have expectations. You watch the film from last year and previous years, and then, but you still got to see him do it. So camp will be big.
Have you actually golfed with Andy?
I have golfed with Andy. Yeah, Andy and I went to the country club. He said he was going to sponsor me, but we'll see. Then he also said he was going to tell the board not to let me in. So we'll see.
He said you're better. Is that true?
I don't know about that. I think Andy just maybe hit more errant shots, where I'm just more kind of straight.
Outside of you, does it feel like you are as close as
with your D-line? You mentioned the guys weren't out there. What did you see from Xavier, Gilliam? As a young defensive tackle, it seemed like, at least from the blue-white game, he was making a lot of plays. Was that indicative of what he did in the spring?
Yes. He jumped out to me all spring. In talking to him, I get a real sense of growth, where he came in here and didn't have a lot of technique, and he's focused hard this past year on his run technique, and now he's moving more to his pass rush technique. So I really get a sense of a guy who's mature and understands where he needs to get better. But when you watch the film, he jumps off it. He did a lot.
I'm just going around the horn at this point. Your outside cornerback room, I should say. 3 guys returning. Davian Collins seemed to be a guy that took to the receivers in a certain way in the one-on-ones that we saw, from not just being physical with them, but also talking to them and kind of getting in their head. Is that an identity you want to develop in those players? Because I've watched a couple of your coaching videos talking about your muckle technique.
Right.
Is that something that you're looking to establish in those guys, or is that just who they are?
Yeah, I think you guys got to be themselves, and AC has certainly got a lot of personality. So I enjoy that. But different guys are going to be different ways, but you just want them to be able to play with a lot of confidence. Whatever their personality is, you want them to be able to play with a lot of confidence, and I think it's a real strength for us. So I'm always going to try to find ways to get them to be more productive, because I think that's a big strength for our defense.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim, are you a wrestling guy at all? Did you know much about Cale before you came here?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Have you had a relationship with him or talked to him yet?
No. I went to Cornell, so when I was head coach at Cornell, so I know wrestling.
Oh right. Yeah,
I know
you
wrestling.
You
Rob
do.
Cole was there. I mean, I know wrestling. But yeah, I know Coach Cale is. I don't care what sport you're in, he's extremely well respected.
Right. And then the other mention about the cornerback room, it's really deep here, maybe the deepest it's ever been. Is there something about those guys, or maybe he can?
Yeah, I mentioned, I think there's a culture, Terry Smith, Coach Smith's done a wonderful job. I mean, I've sat in on some of their meetings, and they hold themselves accountable, and they have, they coach each other, they're hard on each other, so I think he's really developed that culture, where the expectations are high.